Alright, so this is the project for Chain to the Rhythm. You can see there's a vocal track here, and these are all the MIDI tracks that we created in Logic Pro X from here. And the project is at 95 BPM. So let's have a listen.
Are we crazy? Living our lives through.
So that's the intro section, and pretty much the same throughout this section here. Now let's listen to the bridge section, our pre-chorus.
Comfortable, we're living in a bubble, bubble. So comfortable, we cannot see the trouble, trouble. So avoid.
And that leads to the chorus section, which is the same as the first verse.
This is on, and the party on. Turn it up, it's your favorite song. Dance, dance, dance to the distortion.
And that's pretty much for the arrangement. It's pretty straightforward, as you can see. These sections here are all repetitions of each other, this one, except for the pre-chorus section. So let's get into the instruments. Something I need to talk about. We do have this muted filtered section at the start. I will talk about it, but first I shall go through the instruments. So let's go through them one by one. We have this 80s digital piano, and here's how it sounds. Very sort of like a digital kind of piano sound, something from the 80s, so I look for something like that. So this is the Alchemy track for it. You can see under keys, piano, 80s digital piano, and that's pretty much the sound that you get. But the thing is, I do like to stack different synths together to get a bigger or a wider sound. So in this case, I took this and I panned it to the right a little bit. And I have a second track, which pretty much plays the same thing. Pan to the left. Let's listen to that. And that's obviously not so piano-like, but still got some element of those piano sounds. And it's under synth poly, airy synth lit, and it's brassy. So you get the kind of sort of like 80s synth sound. And that's pan to the left. So if you pair them together, you get this wider, richer synth sound. So it's nice and rich and still has that sort of synthy piano sound to it. And underneath that, there is a pad going on. And it's an Alchemy pad as well. So you can see it here. Under pads, fat, perfect pad 01. And I kind of pushed it a little bit from lush to rich. So here's how it sounds. Essentially playing the same chords, a bit lower, or an octave lower. And when you put them together, these two play the rhythmic version of it, and this bottom one plays the pad version of it. So it makes it pretty rich. This covers the sort of mid-low ends about it and sort of glues the whole sound together. Now let's go to the bass. Okay, so it sounds like a live bass player in the song, so I kind of picked an electric bass, under bass, electric bass, ballad electric bass. And I EQ'd it a bit to give it a bit of low end, just to bump up the low end a little bit, and compressed it a little bit. I used a fat electric bass, mucked around with the threshold and make up a little bit. And here's how it sounds. So there's a bit of this kind of hammer-on slide kind of thing going on, pretending to do that anyway. And it sounds pretty convincing when you put it together with everything in the mix. Now, for the drums. I use a drum machine designer under electronic drum kits, drum machine designer, big room. And I took out turn off basically, and turn on and off here. Turn off all the plugins except for the compressor. And the compressor is Fed Live drums. Yep. Tweaked a bit of thresholds and makeups. And that's about it. So make it a little bit fatter with that. And here is the big room. And here's how it sounds. So there's a kick and a clap, basically. Kick is drop kick. From here, you can see, you can pick up here, Drum Machine Designer, kicks, drop kick, and clap. I use a beat machine clap, beat machine clap. And basically it's just kick, clap, kick, clap, kick, clap. Very straightforward kind of beat. And that lays the foundation for the beat. But I do have this thing here at the intro as well. And you can see it over here. There's a crash and a sound. Now the crash is the big room crash, pretty standard. The noise is under dropkick. So I went under FX, noise downer, dropkick. And it kind of works for the song. So that's how the intro comes in. Now there's another kick that gives a different rhythmic pattern to it. And I used under single drums kicks, electronic kicks C1 number 8. C1 just indicates the note that you play it at. So C1 here. And here's how the pattern sounds. And if you pair it together, so the lighter drums, which is the acoustic one, sort of gives it a little bit more rhythm that matches the bass. And this one is just the basic rhythm, the big room one. So if you play it together with the bass, so they kind of play off each other and it gives a nice little rhythm. Now on to the tambourines. We have a studio type kit here. And this one, if you zoom in, you can see it's called Lazy Tambourine. And where did I find that rhythm from? You can find it from the loop browser here. And I was typing tambourine. And I found a lazy tambourine here. And I just pulled it in. But I found that the sound was a little bit too light. So I just made it a smaller sound, panned it to the left. And I paired it with this. Under the channel strip, you can see Legacy, Jam-Packed World, Drum Kits, European Folk Kit. And under the European Folk Kit, there's a tambourine. And this is the pattern. So it sounds a little bit fake. And if you pair it together, it sounds a little bit better. Still not fantastic. But when you put it together with the drums and the bass, it kind of works all right. So that kind of works out. And then we go to this section here. There's a little pattern and you can see it's a loop. So you're just repeating the pattern. You know how to do loops, right? So if you drag it back, this is just the basic pattern and you can just drag it with the loop icon here and you get the loop. So it's just a repeating pattern that goes like this. And it gets a bit louder, so I put a little bit of automation in there, volume automation to become a bit louder. But the basic pattern remains. Yep. And this track, okay, let's go back. This track is an Alchemy track that you can see here is under Synths, Analog, Pop, Simple, Heavy, Sync, Bass. And I moved it from dry to step delay a little bit, just to give it a bit delay kind of sound. And I put a gain here because I wanted the whole overall thing to be louder. So you can do your automations in the track, right? And then if you want to adjust the overall sound, you can put a gain plugin and just up it or pull it down if you so desire. And so that gives the whole sound like this.
Sticky fence like ornaments. So comfortable we're living in a bubble, bubble. So comfortable we cannot see the trouble. Are you
And you have a bass here. So let's play that again.
comfortable we cannot see the trouble? Are you
And you can see it's panned to the left. And it's an Alchemy track as well. And this is how it looks like. Guitars, distorted, bass so full. And I pull it down to fat distortion and a little bit of infra sub here. And I like to do these kind of things where I just take an Alchemy track, find a sound that I kind of like, and it's sort of like the basic texture of what I want to emulate, and then I pull it around here to see if there's somewhere that makes it sound more like that sound, and from there I tweak the distortion, cut off a little bit, and all the little mucking around of the parameters to get the exact sound that I want. It's not the purest way to do it, but it's an effective way to do it for me, and that's how I do it. So it sounds like this.
comfortable we cannot see the trouble? Are you
So it's a bit of a bass fill, and this is the same pattern as this one over here. And okay, let's go to the intro.
Are we crazy?
So you can see that this is sort of like a filtered section here, right? And how I did it, there are many different ways to do it, and how I did it is to kind of like, okay, let's have a look at the mixer, right? Is I sent all these tracks, except for the vocal track, all these tracks, I sent to bus 20. You could send it to whatever bus that you want, right? I just sent it to bus 20. And under bus 20, I created a channel EQ and a flanger and a limiter here, right? This is bus 20. So the channel EQ is this phone filter wideband under EQ tools. Pretty straightforward. I just pulled it back a little bit because original one was a little bit too much high frequency, too little low frequency. I pull everything back. And then there's a flanger, and I use a warm jet flange, right? And you can play around with the mix a little bit, intensity. And what you do with a bus, because it's not on the on your arrange track, is you can click, control click, and you do create track. And what will happen is that you will get the track here, right? And what I do then, I turn on the automation, and then I go to main. So insert 1 bypass, 2 bypass, 3 bypass. So I got 3 effects here, right? So I just want to bypass the first and the second one, the channel EQ and flanger. So originally they're on, you can see here, they're on. And then I just add automation to bypass it on this bar. So if you look at insert 2 bypass, it's exactly the same thing, it bypasses here. So if you hear the sound, it's going through the flanger and EQ.
Are we crazy?
And they disappear here. So they get bypassed. Not disappear, they just get bypassed. Yeah. So you can see, turning on, turning off. Yep. And that's how you do it. So you send all the instruments down to bus, say, whatever, 20. And from bus 20, I put all these and I create a track and automate them. And that's kind of it for that section. Now let's have a look at the sort of pre-chorus section. Now we got this sound and it goes like that. Sort of a low and fat kind of sound. But and this one is an Alchemy track that looks like this. Bass, distorted, analog dark decay, under distort. But what's interesting is that I pair it with this other thing that's playing the same thing, except that it does an octave of it, and it sounds like this. It's like this biggish synth, right? And it looks like this. It's actually the default synth, so you can just go recall default if you're somewhere else, and you pull it to Epic Synth, right? And you pair it together, it sounds like this. And that's why I love stacking synths, as I always say, because this covers the low end, this covers the high end, so you can have different textures that kind of work together to create an even bigger sound. And then we have the electric guitar. Normally for electric guitars, I like to play them because I do play guitar and it's easier to get nicer vibe. But for the benefit of people who don't play guitar and just to use Logic and play around, I use the arpeggiator. So under the MIDI effects, I chose an arpeggiator. And this is how it looks like. I went to grid 1/16 and I drew out this pattern. You just basically just click, you know, like click the patterns that you want. And I click this pattern out and it sounds like this. Pretty okay. I think it can pass off as an sort of muted electric guitar with everything in. I used, under guitars, electric guitars, a muted electric guitar. And I use an amp that is Designer Tweed Crunch, under crunch. Mucked around with the treble and the gain a little bit and some presence. I think I mucked around with the mic placement as well. Wanted it to be a bit honkier. So I actually did some EQing as well. Removed the low end, removed some high end, removed some mid highs and added some honk over here. So that gives it this kind of sound. Bit of honky kind of sound. And underneath that, there's also another arpeggiated guitar. This time the arpeggiation pattern is slightly different. And I use a sculpture instrument and it's called Velo Mute Stratocaster under plucked instruments. And it's pretty much standard. And here's how it sounds. Doesn't sound so realistic, but when you put everything together, it kind of works.
So put your rose-colored glass.
Yep, so that's kind of how it works. This one's panned to the right slightly, this one's panned to the center. And if you notice at the top, I use the piano line for the synth. I use the synth lead hero line. I just copy it to the top, octave the thing. Just to give it a bit more attack. And there's a pad as well. So using the perfect pad here. Yep. And yeah, that's kind of how they work together. This pad sort of gels everything together. And there is an aquamarine static here. So this thing is an Alchemy patch. Let me show you what it is. It's under pads, evolving, noisy, sweeping the expense, and a slow, bright sweep. It's not the exact sound, but it does give a pretty much the same kind of vibe. It's just an octave played here. And I automated it. So it sounds like this. And this is where the chorus hits. And you can see that all these tracks are automated downwards. So they kind of disappear right before the last snare comes in, which is this snare. And yeah, that's kind of the pattern. And I did want this section to have a slightly bigger sort of entry with a big sort of crash. So I picked a stereo drum kit. Under drums and percussions, acoustic drum kits, stereo drum kit. And I just put the crash there. So it's just a crash. So it sounds bigger. It sounds like this.
Party on. Turn it up, it's your favorite song. Dance, dance, dance.
Just feels bigger and wider because this one is a stereo one. And this section here is pretty much like the section over here. So a lot of song just repeats itself. And that's kind of it for this.